Chapter 1733. Oh. Hooray. We've won again. Among the Alliance soldiers, there were a small number of Draconians, and Death Knights from the Black Edge Knights. They welcomed the victory with the same ecstasy. Good news came from the Magic Communication Network. Oh, what did our kings do? The Undying have fallen again. Eagle Nest Mountain is safe again. Should we attack the trolls who are still alive? Holy Light Chapel is safe, damn it. I want to apply for funds to send 100 frogmen down to the lakes to see if there are any bones left. Duque could only smile bitterly and lie to the Undying's reports that it was Arthas' last burst of energy. He couldn't possibly say that their most worshipped Wother Lightbringer, the head of the 5 Silver Saints who represented the ultimate power of light, had changed his profession and become a Lich King, right? Standing behind Theon, Duque fully understood why Theon was the one who rushed to announce the complete destruction of Arthas and the Scourge army. Since the strongest paladin could sacrifice his soul for the peace and stability of the world, he, a not-so-strong paladin, could also lie for this purpose. Duque was already a demigod, a perfect existence that was completely deified by the entire Alliance. Whether Duque was willing or not, he was a model for mortals to ascend to godhood, a role model that the world worshipped. In terms of political propaganda, Duque was a perfect existence. Therefore, the lie that the Lich King was dead and there was no more Scourge army could not be blamed on Duque. If something happened in the future and they really needed to use the Scourge army again, wouldn't it be a slap in the face if they suddenly said that Wother was the Lich King and the current Lich King was on their side? Theon decisively took this possible blame. Overall, the northern expedition was a great success. Great sacrifices were made, and an astronomical amount of food and ammunition were consumed, but the peace of Northrend undoubtedly brought the dawn of peace to the world. Duque let out a long sigh of relief. Historically, Azeroth could be said to be one pot after another, with no respite at all. This was because the other ancient gods had also decided to descend upon the world of Azeroth after witnessing the destruction of Yogg-Saron. When Neltharion, the Wing of Death, recovered from his last battle with Azeroth, he would be bewitched by the ancient gods and summon the elemental army to launch a great purge of the world of Azeroth. When the Wings of Death broke out of the Earth elemental plane where he was recovering from his injuries, the Deep Rock continent, a huge earthquake would cause a cataclysm that would tear the entire world apart. Yes, that was indeed the case in the original version. In this life, the Wing brothers were already dead. Dark Wing's head hung from the 5th floor. The skin of the celestial wings thumped loudly. Speaking of which, Nesario's skull seemed to have been stolen? In any case, Duque really didn't think that the Wings of Death would have the same destructive power as before. After all, in the original history, the Wings of Death had never died. He was only injured and went into hiding. Then he gave Enzos and the other ancient gods a shot of adrenaline, which made him so fierce. Now the Wings of Death had been broken into 18 pieces. Not only was his soul ground down, but his dragon body was also destroyed by Maligos, who hated him at that time. If the Wings of Death had simply been resurrected as an undead dragon, Duque believed that he could let the Wings of Death overturn him with one hand. Of course, Duque was prepared for any eventuality. After all, in the Cataclysm, the final boss who came out to cause trouble was Nesario, but there were also a few other guys who were quite powerful. For example, Duque's old friends, the Flame Demon King Ragnaros, and the Wind Elemental Lord Alakir. I don't know why. I can feel the elements of the earth, it seems to be a little abnormal, Duque said to everyone. Jaina narrowed her eyes. Could it be that you extracted too much elements during the battle with Arthas? Nonsense. You dug a cup of snow on the edge of the Ice Crown Glacier and used it as ice cream. Wouldn't that cause the Ice Crown Fortress to collapse instantly? Duque rolled his eyes at Jaina. The huckster Duque simply made a decision on his own. I'm a little worried about the stability of the Eastern Kingdom. After all, the undead calamity may break out again. Let the Dalajan and half of the Flying Fleet go back first. Although Duque's order was a little rushed, the soldiers were eager to go home after the battle. After all, they had been in this godforsaken place where peeing in the wild for more than 30 seconds would freeze. Who wouldn't want to go back to that warm home? Eager to return home, not many people suspected that Duque was abusing his official position for personal gain or something. Most of them cheered as they carried out the order. Duque seemed to casually issue a strange order like, after returning to the Eastern Kingdom, at least 1/3 of the Flying Fleet must be on standby in the air, and intentionally or unintentionally let the army avoid some specific areas. Then Duque completely relaxed and enjoyed the journey of dividing the spoils. Wother became the 3rd Lich King, and the treasures of the first and second generation naturally became the heroes' spoils of war. One had to know that back then, Arthas had led the Scourge army to sweep through most of the Lordaeron continent. How rich were the spoils of war! Now, Arthas' spoils of war had also become the spoils of the Alliance's heroes. But now, it was more like returning the items to their rightful owners. Farinrush Kuel Salus Protector was a crossbow that looked a little like a blue Karaji Bugman. Originally, this crossbow was not that powerful, but after the Scourge craftsman adjusted it and added frost damage, this crossbow became the top crossbow. It was only slightly inferior to Queen Sheila's artifact, Solidar. Saying it was slightly inferior was mainly because of its level. In reality, in Azeroth, an artifact was an artifact and there was no such thing as being outdated. An extremely strengthened epic weapon might be stronger than the epic weapons that had been born before, but no matter how strong it was, it could not be stronger than the same type of artifact. This was the limit in reality. There were a total of 3 crossbows and in the end they were happily accepted by Lilith, Chandris and Lor Themar. Heaven's Fall, Blade of Great Lie, was a dagger and the thick blade looked very much like a kitchen knife. In reality the size of this dagger was not large. As they did not confiscate Illidan's pair of Azeroth's dual blades, this epic dagger was given to Vanessa after some discussion. Looking at the strange inscription on the dagger, Lies Hurt, Flattery Ruin, Vanessa did not know why but she rolled her eyes at Duque. The following division of the spoils was a little more formal. As the strongest bosses basically had artifacts, most of these epic equipment were given to whoever wanted it. Chapter 1734. There was a one-handed axe called Summon of Calamity, Lordaeron's Axe of the King. It was a decent axe. It was a pity that there was an ugly skull on the blade. The Alliance did not have many warriors and death knights. If it was in the past, it would have been used as a souvenir. This time the Horde had sent someone over. Even though Varrock had joined the tribe as a private individual, Duke still gave him enough face. He was an extremely dedicated and loyal warrior who had survived from the Battle of the Dark Portal to the return of the army. There were 2 axes and they were both given to the father and son. Yes, little Seraphar had been saved. Even though Drano had to bear the humiliation of losing and being controlled, he returned to the Horde as a Death Knight. It could be predicted that Thrall, who had wanted him to be the next chief, would have no choice but to choose his successor from the other candidates. At least Varrock did not have to lose his son completely. After taking the axe of the king, Varrock said that he had to quickly go back to Thrall to ask for forgiveness. He hoped that Thrall would forgive him for disobeying orders and fighting on his own. The father and son left. In fact, if it was not for the fact that the axe of the king had given them so much power, Varrock would not even have the face to take it. Varrock took the axe and bowed deeply to Duque. Duke Marcus, this is not the first time we have met. But every time I fight alongside you, I can feel your wisdom, bravery, and generosity. You are a perfect leader. If possible, I hope to have more opportunities to fight alongside you in the future. I hope that the Horde and the Alliance will never go to war again. Varrock was sincere, but there was a tinge of bitterness under his sincerity. Because as the supreme commander of the tribe, he had already sensed that something was amiss. He knew and so did Duque. They just did not point it out. Duque smiled. I think that day will come. To the onlookers this was just Duke's politeness. Only the 2 female evil demons hiding in the shadows raised the corners of their mouths. It was a silent sneer. Delano, who was at the side, still felt like he was dreaming. He who was bent on fighting the Lich King, died under Frostmourne. Originally, he thought that his twisted heart would forever bear the fall. Unexpectedly, the hero team led by Duque had defeated Arthas. The person who had saved him from the swamp of despair was Grom, whom he had once admired. What was worse was that Grom was now a direct subordinate of Duque. The entanglement in his heart made Delano unable to accept this reality for a very long time after he regained his sanity and freedom. In the end he also bowed to Duque. Duke Marcus, I never liked you. That doesn't mean I don't approve of you. This time. Delanos's dead face puffed up, and Varrock slapped him hard on the back. Delanos finally said, I thank you. Let's just say that I owe you 3 lives. I will definitely find a chance to return the favor. Don't worry, I'm already an Undying, I won't become your servant like Grom. After saying that, Delanos actually turned around and left angrily. Sorry, he's actually... Varrock was embarrassed. Duque shook his head. It's okay, I understand. He's just honest and doesn't want to express his feelings. Varrock punched his chest with one hand. If the beastmen bowed, it was out of personal gratitude. Then punching the chest meant the greatest degree of approval for the other party. Varrock and his son left. After they left, the remaining alliance powerhouses in Naxxramas suddenly became lively. Kale, that's disgusted with Jaina. He took the blood surge Kel Thazad sword of pain, while Jaina took the most valuable staff, Jaku's Antonida's holy staff. Without discussing the special meaning, the magic strength bonus brought by the two magic weapons was the same. The only difference was that the sword of pain provided more magic critical strike chance, while the holy staff gave higher endurance and spirit bonuses as well as a higher spell speed. The former was more unconventional while the latter was more stable. This choice also showed that the two of them had different paths. Kale, that's awkward identity as a former prince meant that if he wanted to continue to maintain a place in the throne conference, he had to have magic power that was no less than or second only to Duque. Jaina only needed to follow the prescribed order and become Duque's follower in the future. Of course, the most important thing was that the owner of the holy staff was the legacy of Jaina's previous magic teacher Antonidas. In this life, if not for Duque's interference, Jaina might have followed the trajectory of history and become Antonida's disciple. Looking at the magic staff with 6 exquisite runes around the top, which looked like a trident, Jaina murmured, "I don't know why, but I feel that it's very familiar. Perhaps it's fate." What could Duque say? He could only smile bitterly. Tyron picked a staff made from Nordrassil's stained twig. After purification, it became Nordrassil's holy twig. Although it was a staff, the main bonuses were agility, endurance, critical hit and level acceleration. This time, no raptor druid joined the hero group, so Tyron did not hold back. When the top-tier epic double-edged sword, Groflosa Silverhand Knight's holy sword, was also given to Mara for Dragon, a second-tier powerhouse who did not directly participate in the Lich King's crusade, everyone knew that the main event was coming. Dozens of fragments emitting powerful energy waves were gathered in the middle of Naxxramas' armory hall. Almost every powerhouse above the epic level of the Alliance was allowed to come and watch. It was different from when they defeated Yogg-Saron. At that time, there was still the Lich King, and no one was in the mood to hold a grand celebration. This time the ceremony was more solemn and grand. This was because Duque told them that these fragments could be combined to form a powerful divine artifact. Another top-tier divine artifact. Although this was not the first time the Alliance had obtained a divine artifact. But every time a new divine artifact was born, it would always attract the attention of all busybodies. The heroes who already had a divine artifact appeared calm. According to the tacit rules, it would not be their turn. Unless every member of the hero group had at least one divine artifact. At this time, the only ones who were excited were those who did not have a divine artifact. Duque pretended to inspect it, then announced, "This is a double-edged axe. A divine double-edged axe, who should I give it to?" Chapter 1735. Two-handed axe? When everyone heard this, the eyes of the warriors, death knights and paladins all lit up. Although being a main tank had its privileges, and the first divine weapon, the Balrog's hand, was given to Magni, which melee fighter did not want to beat someone up. After all, those who could become bosses were usually very large in size. There were very few people like Arthas who had a normal body size. Who would want to stare at a boss's smelly feet all day and carry out boring defensive actions? There was actually an unspoken rule. In principle, the leaders of each country would take the lead, and it had to be harmonious. It would be best if the leaders of each race could have a divine weapon. The most tactful one was Danath Trollbane. Whether he was a king or a member of a hero group, he was too inexperienced. He raised his hand lightly. "I still prefer to use a sword." This was a tactful rejection. There were not many warriors in the Alliance, and the only one left was Muradin Bronzebeard. But his brother already had a Balrog's hammer, and Muradin was not the leader, so he was naturally happy to watch the show. As for the Death Knights, Darian had just joined the Alliance, and was still the leader of a second-tier independent camp. He was not qualified. Basically, he was looking for someone from the Paladins. At this moment, a funny scene happened. Me. Hoof Imriel raised her hand high. Her bum bouncing, it felt like she was a primary school student answering a teacher's question. Merard, who was beside Hoof, facepalmed. He probably wanted to ask why he had such a weird boss. That's right, Imriel was definitely qualified. Among the 5 major races in the Alliance, the humans had the most divine weapons, followed by the dwarves and elves. In theory, only the gnomes and Drenii were left. Master craftsman Jerbin Mekatok. He was a technical geek and he was not even a professional. In theory, Imriel was the most suitable. The problem was, when it came to the distribution of divine weapons, the rules were usually to give it to each other and reluctantly accept it. At least it would look good. Now Hoof had volunteered to sign up. Merritt did not know what the others thought of it, but he felt that the Dreenei's reputation had been lost. Recently, as the leader of the Dreenei, Imriel had matured a lot. This caused many people to unintentionally overlook the fact that she was actually not even 20 years old. She might be able to be more serious during the throne conference, but once it was not a formal occasion she would easily jump out. Seeing the hooves jumping around, Duque laughed heartily. By the way, I've only seen you use a one-handed hammer. Are you sure you know how to use a two-handed axe? But since I can't be a holy paladin that specializes in healing, and can't be a defensive paladin, I think I can only be a retribution paladin. Hoof honestly expressed that her healing and defense were trash. Merritt covered his eyes with his big hands. He couldn't look anymore. If she wasn't the leader of the Dreenei people, everyone would probably ask, "Is this the reason why you applied for the divine double-handed axe?" Duque smiled and looked around. Then, is there any other leader who feels that they need a divine double-handed axe? If so, please state your reasons. If more than one leader wanted the same divine artifact, they hoped that they could negotiate with each other to solve it. If we can't reach an agreement, we'll vote on the spot at the throne meeting. What he heard was, of course, hee. No objections. Muradin was the first to speak. Imriel, now that you have the divine axe, you'll have to be very fierce in the future. Gavin Raid winked. Well, then I'll have to attract the enemy's attention in the future. Magni also joked. Without any objections, Duque naturally followed the advice and handed all the fragments to Imriel. As the highest commander of the Alliance, I declare that this fragment of the divine double-handed axe belongs to Imriel from this moment onwards. Wow, Gavin Raid whistled. Everyone applauded. Imriel eagerly took the divine artifact fragment, and then he was troubled. How do I reforge this divine artifact double-handed axe? Duke knew what it was, but he pretended to be ignorant. Isn't there a divine craftsman here? Duque flattered Magni. As the super-powerful person who forged Ashbringer, Magni Bronzebeard was worthy of the title of Divine Smith. He actually had a good impression of Imriel. He walked over and picked up the fragment seriously. Soon he frowned deeply. What's wrong? Imriel asked. Magni did not answer directly. Darien, come here for a moment. The Death Knight leader strode over. The two whispered for a while, then Magni announced a piece of news that was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue to Imriel. This pile of fragments of the double-handed axe is indeed a divine artifact, but it's a shadow-type divine artifact. Through material backtracking we found out that this weapon's name is Shadowmourne. The Hoof, who was originally in high spirits, instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and entered a dumbfounded state. She was a paladin, what was she doing with a shadow-type weapon? Duque snickered at the side. This was not a game. As long as the players looked cool they would not care if it was a shadow or a flaming axe. They would not care if there was a ferocious skeleton on the axe. In reality the Dreenei worshipped light. They believed in the holy light. As the leader, Imriel, who was such a dainty female holy knight, holding a bloody and ferocious two-handed great axe and adorned with skeletons, anyone who saw it would think that Imriel had fallen into depravity. At this moment, Hoof had nothing to live for. At this moment, Hoof's entire life was gloomy. She was dumbfounded. She only felt that all the colors in her vision had turned gray. Is there still hope? Hoof murmured. Magni and Darien looked at each other. Magni sighed. This is almost impossible. Magni was basically right. That was because, apart from the insane attack power and basic strength and endurance attributes, the biggest special effect of Shadowmourne was that it had a certain chance of extracting the enemy's soul fragment to increase one's own strength. When the number of soul fragments reached 10, the special effect of Panorama would be triggered. All enemies within 15 yards would be dealt group shadow damage and greatly increase one's strength. This was a classic divine artifact that benefited oneself at the expense of others. From the perspective of judging good and evil, this could be said to be an absolute magic artifact. Hoof's face immediately collapsed. These fragments had already bound her soul to it. Only Merritt noticed that Magni had used the word almost. Wait, Your Majesty Bronzebeard, you sound like there's still a chance? Save? Of course there's a chance. Chapter 1736. Magni was a straightforward person by nature. Unless it concerned the Alliance or the survival of the dwarves, he would not lie or hide his secrets. Before Shadowmourne, is recast. Theoretically, there is a chance to change the properties of this divine relic. After all, light and shadow are not completely opposed to each other. They can be converted. It's like when a Naru loses all his holy energy, he will become an evil Muru. Or a certain person who suffered from a shadow curse that should have killed him 10,000 times in the past, but still managed to survive. Those who were familiar with him knew what he meant. Merritt noticed that a few alliance leaders had a look of understanding on their faces. Magni put down the fragment of Shadowmourne, and said solemnly, "Recasting a divine relic is no longer a task for the alliance, so this is considered a private task. I won't charge a single cent less, but I definitely won't charge more than what I should charge. Of course, Imriel, you must find that guy first and help you convert the fragment." Missions involving divine relic always seem to be full of twists and turns. Rarely was it as smooth as Solidar. Although Imriel was mentally prepared, she had to admit that she had underestimated the difficulty of obtaining this divine relic. Just like that, the gathering that was supposed to witness the creation of the divine relic ended in a slightly strange atmosphere. At night, Duque stayed in Naxxramas to rest. As expected, Duque waited for Imriel's visit. When Vanessa brought Imriel into Duque's study and left, Imriel said, I heard from Sister Jaina that you might be able to convert the fragment of Shadowmourne?" Duque smiled. It was no secret among the old leaders of the Alliance that he was a shadow priest. If it was purifying the fragments of the divine relic, Tyrion and the others could do it too. But when it came to converting, only he could do it. Not maybe, but definitely. However, it was a rare opportunity to extort money. If Duque did not take advantage of it, he would not be able to face himself. Duque raised his hand, and a golden pool of high-purity holy water appeared beside him. He raised his hand again, and another pool full of shadow energy appeared. He put his hands together, and a modified Tai Chi diagram appeared. In Yang Fish, this great Tao, where light and shadow blended together in harmony and unity, would make one feel that it was high-end and grand just by looking at it. Imriel was in awe. At this moment, she had completely forgotten about Merritt's warning that Duque might have deliberately tempted her to take the divine artifact axe. Can you really do it? Yes, but it will take a lot of effort. I will have to overdraft a lot of divinity. Duque deliberately raised the price. Can I really afford it? Imriel foolishly took the bait. For a moment, Duque really felt a sense of guilt, as if he was instilling the Edo 48 punch into a lowly who believed in Santa Claus. But when he thought of his own little wish, Duque suddenly felt confident. No, the Alliance needed Drini. Although I am a demigod, I am also the commander of the Alliance. I'm more than happy to increase the Alliance's strength. But I have a small request. Duque tried his best to calm his voice so that he did not seem so strange. Request. Imriel gulped. Behind her, the little tail wriggled uneasily. Yes, it's really just a small request. Duque deliberated for a moment. Actually, I don't know why, but I've always been interested in your tail. Imriel's face instantly turned red. The tail is a special existence to the Drini. It has a very, very special meaning. Can I say it? I don't want to say it. I want to touch your tail, can I? Touch it until I'm satisfied. Duque's request made Imriel want to vomit blood on the spot. Difficult. This was really difficult. Her tail was very sensitive. But she wanted Duque to put in so much effort to modify a divine artifact. It would be unreasonable not to pay a price. The temptation of a divine artifact was too great. Unknowingly, she remembered the scene when she beat up the Blood Queen in her enhanced state. That valiant Imriel, just thinking about it made her feel cool. Finally, Imriel gave in. Really, you can only touch my tail. Swear. You can't do other strange things. I swear. Duque made a solemn vow as if he was eating lettuce. Imriel squirmed, found a seat by the window, and brought a chair over to sit down. She was thinking that as long as she did not look at Duque, perhaps it would not be so awkward. Looking at the ice-crowned glacier might help her calm down. Seeing that Imriel was ready, Duque finally reached out his evil claws. Ugh! A high-pitched, sensitive moan startled Duque. Did I use too much force? No. This is actually my problem. Imriel resisted the strange feeling from her tail. Unknowingly, her hands were clasped tightly on the chair. She tried to focus her mind on the snow-capped mountain. However, it seemed that because she was not looking, her senses became sharper. Frankly speaking, Duque did not use too much force. At first, the light touch, like a feather brushing past, made Imriel's nerves extremely sensitive. From light to heavy, Duque simply stroked Imriel's tail like he was stroking a cat. However, the shame towards Imriel turned into a strange flow of heat in just 2 to 3 minutes, rising from the deepest part of her heart, and then converging to a place that made her extremely ashamed. Suddenly, the hoof realized that the seemingly unchanging iceberg in the distance had overlapped with her situation. Spring had come. The ice and snow melted. Drop by drop, the ice water converged into a stream. At first, all the water still gathered in the hidden cave. However, as the snow accumulated more and more, it would eventually break through everything. Accompanied by a loud noise, the water broke through the dam and poured down violently. Duque was dumbfounded. Just a moment ago he thought that a living tail was quite cute. Before his transmigration, although he did not like his cat very much, he still often stroked its tail. After his transmigration he secretly kept this long-lost habit. Just when Duque was having fun stroking and stroking, Imriel suddenly let out a high-pitched scream, and then collapsed on the chair with her whole body flushed. What the hell was this? The worst thing was, right at that moment, the door of the study suddenly opened and Kalia and Queen Sylvie came together. Duque was dumbfounded, and after a long time he said in despair, "If I said that I was just playing with her tail and I did not touch anywhere else, would you believe me?" Chapter 1737. Kalia and Servanas were also dumbfounded. What was supposed to be a night raid had turned into a scene of catching an adulterer. To catch an adulterer, one had to be monogamous in the truest sense of the word. A great man in Du's previous life had said that a small notebook was a guarantee of property, not a guarantee of feelings. After arriving at Azeroth, Du quickly let go of himself. Duque had started a harem 20 years ago, and they all voluntarily threw themselves at him like moths to a flame. She was clearly the one who liked to add one. What right did she have to stop Duque from messing around? Moreover, Duque really wasn't pushing Hoof down. Although it looked no different from pushing her, Hoof's whole body was limp, as if she had already turned into a pool of spring mud. Every corner of her body had been drained of energy because of the extreme excitement just now, and now she didn't even want to move a finger. She had the despair of being caught. She wanted to struggle, wanted to argue, but her mouth was wide open. She could only gasp for air, unable to say a word. There was no need to mention how vexing that feeling of shyness was. Her clothes were all intact, but she had the illusion that she had been completely seen and touched. At this moment, Duque was still holding onto her tail and forgot to let go. Her little tail seemed to be struggling to escape from the devil's grasp. It suddenly jumped a few times and Duque subconsciously tightened his grip. "Oh no. I'm so sensitive." Hoof cried loudly again. This time Duque was so scared that he let go. "Oh, that." Duque didn't know how to explain it all. No matter how he explained it now, it would just be a cover-up. So awkward. Time to go. Duque gritted his teeth and stood up. "I suddenly remembered that I still have a batch of urgent documents to read. I'll go back to Karazhan first." With that, Duque raised his hand and opened a portal, wanting to escape. Suddenly there was a murderous aura. Duque was just about to move, but it was already too late. Queen Sylvanas wrapped around him like a water snake. Tonight, Queen Sylvanas was not her usual self. She was wearing a thick cloak, and as soon as she pressed against Duque's back, Duque knew why. This bulge, Servanas's imposing manner, clearly showed that he wanted to surpass her big sister and third sister in terms of children. "What are you feeling guilty about? Do you think that we don't know that you bullied Onyxia and provoked Vashj? But I'm a very busy queen. How can I be as free as a supreme commander like you? If there's someone who can help you vent your boring energy, I can't thank them enough." Queen Sylvie embraced Duque from behind. On the other side, Kalia had already covered her hoof with a thin blanket because of exhaustion. She raised the corner of her mouth a little mischievously. Duque, you've made her like this. If little Imriel can't get married in the future, you'll have to take responsibility." When the hoof heard that, she was so embarrassed that she actually fainted. At this moment, Duque felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Kalia's voice became an auditory hallucination, repeating endlessly in his ears. "You have to take responsibility, responsible." Duque was indignant. Duque was in despair. I'm just rubbing my tail. Why do I have to take responsibility? Isn't this the same as rubbing a cat or a dog?" "Tiske, you almost broke her and you're treating it as normal play? No conscience. You're too stubborn." The two queens pouted at the same time. "All right, Duque, I'm not going to care about your trivial matters. Let's solve our problems today." Queen Sylvie and Kalia, one in black and the other in white, wore thick cloaks. Duke's throat made a gurgling sound as he swallowed hard. He did not know when, but he was forced from the study to the bedroom by the two women. When Duke collapsed, he soon found out that the two queens had actually used vacuum packaging tonight. What the heck? Black stockings, white stockings, garter stockings, long legs. Bring. Jill can forget about having a day off tonight. When Duque reacted, he heard the sound of flowing water in the fortress room that was suspended above the ice-crowned glacier. He saw the dazzling turbulent waves. They seemed to have forgotten something. That night, Duque had a dream for the first time in a long time. He dreamt that he was riding a beautiful blue female twin-horned beast, galloping forward. The twin-horned beast was so bumpy that he subconsciously held one of the horns of the twin-horned beast tightly, and then grabbed the tail of the unicorn to prevent himself from falling. Riding the horse and galloping, he was happy. If life was like this, he could die without regrets. When he woke up the next day, their eyes met. Ah! An exaggerated scream came from Duque's room. Duque's face turned pale. Oh my God! What did I do? Wait, I need some time alone. One of her hooves was so shy that she wanted to die. She directly covered her head with the blanket and put on a funny posture of an ostrich burying its head in the sand. Her little tail wagged. It was unknown whether she was smug or shy or both. Duque. Evil thoughts grew in him. Anyway, he was going to be the scapegoat. In for a penny, in for a pound. He directly told the hooves what a backstab was. The divine sword was unsheathed. $9.99 phantom stab combo. Then Du showed mercy and said that Imriel was actually a holy knight with strong attack power. So, for the advancement of the Alliance and for the harmony of the various races in the Alliance, he decided to fast for 3 hours. He decided to fast and bathe for 3 hours. He summoned Alonsis Fail and borrowed Naru. Finally, he cast the spell for 49 minutes. Finally, all the shards of Shadowmourne were converted to holy attributes. Since the nature of the weapon had changed, it was much easier to reforge it. The ferocious skull on the top of the original axe was removed. Under the skillful hands of the divine craftsman, Magni, it was replaced with a Naru relief, which served as a foil to Imriel's identity as a Drenii Holy Knight. On the 1st of June, year 26 of the Dark Portal, one of the 5 major races in the Alliance, the leader of the Drenii tribe, Imriel, obtained a divine double-handed axe that belonged solely to her. Looking at the light axe that was glowing with holy light, Imriel tried to trigger the special effect. The original version extracted the enemy's soul, but now it absorbed the enemy's shadow energy and converted it into holy energy. When the charging was complete, it would form a strengthened version of God's wrath. It would spread out like a flame, burning all evil into ashes. The attack power of this divine artifact axe was comparable to that of the Ashbringer, but its ability to harm others for its own benefit and to target evil creatures made its endurance even higher. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was definitely one of the best holy divine weapons. Imriel, with her petite body, was holding such a huge axe. It looked as strange as it could get. After Magni reforged the divine artifact for her, she went to Duke as soon as possible. So, the name Shadow Sorrow doesn't match an axe at all. Duque, can you give me a better name? Duque pondered for a moment. Since it came from Icecrown Fortress, it is a new divine weapon that was born after Frostmourne was destroyed. To differentiate it, why don't we call it Flame Joy? Chapter 1738. Happy Flames? What a strange name. Hoof's tail swayed left and right as if she was in a dilemma. What? You don't like it? Duque smiled but did not say anything. This name was actually the pen name of an author before he transmigrated. This guy's novels were good, but they were too slow. Anyway, this guy had this thought when he'd chosen this pen name. Duque might as well put him on stage as a small souvenir. On the other side, Hoof seemed to be trying to please Duque, but she still nodded. Then I'll use this name. Happy Flames. It felt like it matched my personality quite well. Even though I can accept those heavy things and know that sacrifices are inevitable in battle, I'm still willing to be a little more optimistic. I'm already very happy just looking at you. Duque spoke the truth. Looking at such a straightforward girl, he felt much more at ease. Keeping an eye on the Alliance's general situation every day, reading mountains and oceans of official documents, and balancing the interests of different nations and races as much as possible to resolve disputes. He was already tired enough. It was also a very good psychological relief to have this happy person. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, Hoof's face and neck instantly turned red, and her little tail swayed a lot more. She was clearly nervous. Ah well, Duque. My tail hurt a little last time. Can you take a look at it tonight? As she spoke, her face had already turned red from her neck to the top of her breasts. Well, I have an appointment with Gerben tonight to check on the latest weapon research. I might have to stay up all night. Duque deliberately said that he was not free. Almost at the same time, Duque saw Hoof's tail droop like rice under the scorching sun. Is that so? Next time. As the leader of the Drenii, Hoof was also quite busy. Especially since the Drenii had only been in Azeroth for less than a year, there were too many construction projects and settlement issues that she had to follow up on. Suddenly she thought of something. After the war, Professor Willen asked me to come here more often. He said that it would be of great help to the revival of the Drenii race. Although I don't quite understand why, I think I'll have the opportunity to come and find you often. Duque felt a sense of despair on the spot. You're so dumb and adorable to this extent. Oof, you're really amazing. The Drenii wanted to build their main city, Exodar, because they lacked manpower, money, and resources. Other than crying for supplies, what else could he be here for? Damn it, you've been sold off by your own mentor, yet you're still helping him count the money. At this moment, Duque was absolutely sure that Willen, that cunning old fox, had calculated this point. He sold the hoof to him, knowing that he wouldn't mistreat the hoof. Duque immediately changed his mind. In any case, he would definitely suffer a loss. Since he had already suffered a great loss, he might as well take it back. Oh no, it should be a small psychological comfort for the time being. Duque pretended to take out his schedule, and then crossed out the last few lines of the factory inspection schedule at the bottom. Okay, I'm finally free for the late night slot. That night, Duque rubbed his tail all night, and while he was at it he did some stabbing and whatnot. Thanks to Duque's scheme to kill Nesario, the expected cataclysm, or rather, earth fission, did not come immediately after Northrend's crusade. This allowed the Alliance and Horde to catch a rare breath. With a stroke of his pen, Duque changed the post-war national plan to 30% military and 70% civilian. All the factories in the army cancelled the 3-shift system and changed it to a 2-shift system. The surplus production capacity of the military factories was transferred to the shipbuilding industry. There was one more thing that Duque was very strict about: hoarding a large amount of food and still prohibiting large-scale brewing. As a transmigrator, Duque naturally knew what the cataclysm as precursors were. Therefore, according to his memories from before he transmigrated, Duque planned to migrate the population of the areas that were very likely to be destroyed, and set up a large number of magic cannons in the major cities. Strictly speaking, the cataclysm was caused by the 4 major elements working together. Duque, who had always been good at planning ahead, first cut off the orders for tanks and flying warships. Conventional cannons that used TNT explosives were not good for any of the 4 major elements. At this point in time, Pharaoh was destined to enter the peak of his life. Therefore, Duque stepped up the construction of the magic net, as well as the training of beginner mages. It would take more than 10 years to nurture a Radiant Moon mage. In the past, it was very difficult to nurture a magic apprentice into a qualified Earth mage, because it required talent, comprehension, perseverance, and a lot of practice. Now that the magic net existed, the requirements in this regard were greatly reduced. As long as one had a bit of magic talent and could sense the elements, Duque could use the magic net to help them master basic magic in the shortest time possible. This kind of simplification was almost as brainless as the legendary one-button casting. This caused a large number of traditional mages to call this retrogression and degeneration. But it was undeniable that the number of registered official mages in the Alliance had directly exceeded 50,000. This was a very exaggerated number. After all, before the first year of the Dark Portal, the entire Dalagen only had 4 official mages. Everything was like this. Only by increasing the base number could there be more room to choose the elites. Another thing that made the Alliance's soldiers feel more at ease was that the 4 Guardians of Alcavan had brought their own underlings and were stationed in several major cities of the Alliance's Guardians. Iron Furnace had gained the favor of Rock Guardian Alcavan. New Silvery Moon was overseen by the Storm Warden Amaran. Originally, Flame Guardian Coralon and Ice Guardian Turawan were willing to follow Duque to Karazhan. Duque thought about it again and convinced the 2 Guardians to let Turawan go to Theramore and let Coralon guard Stormwind City. In addition, after some communication with Oder and the other Guardians, Freya was a guest in Darnassus as a nature consultant. Mimiran, on the other hand, built a new workshop in Lordaeron to develop new military equipment. Oder went to Exodar. Duque did not hesitate to let all the large cities in the alliance with a population of more than 200,000 people have at least one demigod guarding them for a long time. It could be said that in this rare period of free time, although Duque had adjusted the alliance's economy to be mainly civilian in reality, this was another kind of arm to the teeth. Interestingly, Duque waited for a long time but the cataclysm did not come. Instead, the birth of his two children finally came. Yes, Aurelia and Sasha pestered Duque, asking Duque to input magical energy. Duque could not stand it and shamefully gave in. Chapter 1739. The Dark Portal, 30th of September, Stormwind City, Duke Marcus Mansion. This test. I didn't make it through after all. Grieving, Duque gently took off the last piece of clothing on someone else's wife with his hands trembling with despair. That bright and clean body, that pink and tender skin, just like that. Duque, have you changed your diaper? Aurelia's shout came from next door. I've changed it. No. Duque responded in despair, then looked at his 3-month-old daughter Enilis Marcus, who would giggle at him. Duque had lived 2 lives, but he had never felt the loss of his moral integrity as he did now. He raised his head, his face 45 degrees to the sky, and a drop of true crocodile tear finally fell from the corner of his eye. With the most touching magnetic voice, he called out to his compatriots on Earth far away. Alas! Young people, don't think that there will always be a free lunch. If you get on the bus and don't jump out of it for a moment, then you'll have to pay for it. This was definitely Duque's most profound experience. Since his transmigration, Duque had always felt that Azeroth had been good to him. Although he died at the beginning, he could be resurrected. Then he sent girls, system elves, and Duque ascended to godhood. It stood to reason that Duque should not be dissatisfied. After so much time had passed, Duque felt that he seemed to have been tricked. If he had shot the girls of Azeroth and then ran away, maybe the will of Azeroth really could not do anything to him. But with a child, everything was different. In a real sense, he was connected with the fate of this planet. Alas! For this bit of sugar, he had to swallow artillery shells and fight the Burning Legion on behalf of Azeroth. It was really tiring. Big sister, didn't we agree not to change Duque's diaper? Servanaz's voice came from outside the door. It's just a test. The door opened and a group of brides in white wedding dresses barged in. They surrounded Duque, who was holding a cotton diaper, with the ferocious momentum of a crowd that wanted to know the truth. That's right. In the end, Duque was unable to dodge this attack. Although Duque knew that this day would come sooner or later, he still sighed when it really came. Sometimes, Duque even maliciously speculated that if Nesario did not die, and directly let the cataclysm take advantage of the wrath of the Lich King to attack him, would he have the chance to continue to escape from reality and avoid the forced marriage? If the villains didn't cause trouble, Duque would have no excuse. Most importantly, Duque accidentally killed someone. As if they were stimulated by Arthas's complete fall, whether it was Kalia or Servanaz after that day, they often came together to find Duque. Duque often couldn't control himself and ended up losing his life. It seemed like it happened at the same time. Now that Kalia was more than 4 months pregnant, it was almost to the point where he couldn't hide it anymore. In fact, after knowing that Kalia was pregnant and insisted on giving birth, Duque knew that he couldn't avoid this attack. Although Aurelia and Winrisa were the leaders of the Silver Dawn and didn't have that much influence, Kalia and Servanaz were queens, and the queens of a large country at that. It wouldn't be good if they got pregnant out of wedlock. After some discussion, Duque's harem unanimously decided to let Duque marry Servanaz, Kalia, Elucia, and Jaina in one go. In fact, if it wasn't for the bad influence, Tyrant and Hoof would have wanted to marry Windrunner's eldest and third sisters. Aurelia and Winrisa didn't want to marry Duque with Servanaz to avoid affecting the royal power of the Sin Dorii kingdom. Tyrant was the high priestess of the Night Elves and a saintess. Before she stepped down, she wouldn't dare to mess around. But recently, Fandral Staghelm had been very active. To be honest, most of the humans in the Alliance had started to accept the Draenei who looked like Eridar, but they weren't ready to accept such a large-scale interracial marriage. In comparison, the Blood Elves, who had skin color similar to humans, were more acceptable. So Hoof had to suffer. Marrying 4 women at once with the status of a co-wife, and 4 freaking queens at that, was definitely a huge blow to the monogamous tradition of Azeroth. Even an honest person like Theon said that this was a bit too shocking for the people of Azeroth. Fortunately, Duque had a way to deal with it: hire a paid army to create hype. Although Duke Marcus dated 4 queens as a mortal, he's already a demigod. as an immortal in the world of Azeroth, how can he be compared to a mortal? His Majesty Menethil, Barav and Proudmoore are also women who have been granted eternal life. We shouldn't use the rules of the mortal world to restrict them. Gods belong to the gods, mortals belong to mortals. After some fooling, the commotion within the alliance finally subsided. Originally, Duque had promised that the Burning Legion would arrive in about 10 years. After the final battle with the Burning Legion, if Azeroth won, he would step down from his position as the commander of the alliance. His wives would also step down to prevent the formation of an eternal kingdom. The other countries in the alliance didn't have much of an opinion. If you can remain as wise as you are now, it doesn't matter if you continue to lead the alliance. After all, the dwarves aren't a short-lived race, Magni said. The dwarf has the same opinion. Great craftsman Jerbin nodded. As long as your eternal life doesn't bring about corruption. Varian curled his lips. As long as the alliance doesn't become an empire, the various countries and races can still decide if they want to leave or not. That's fine. Daneth Trollbane was very straightforward. Since no one had any objections, and ignoring Duque's weak voice that the Burning Legion couldn't be extinguished, Duque's harem happily decided that the 4 queens would marry Duque. It was tomorrow, the 1st of October. Come, let's see who's prettier in our wedding dresses. Queen Sylvia pulled Duque's hand and dragged her over. The third sister, Sasha, took over the job of wrapping diapers. It had to be said that all 4 queens were extremely beautiful. The biggest selling point of Queen Sylvia's wedding dress was her long legs. It was a white dress that looked like a ranger's short skirt. The only thing that didn't show through was the top half, while the bottom half was completely a thin white muslin, showing off her long legs. Kalia was dressed in pure white, and still had a girlish waistline, making her look as pure and beautiful as Snow White. Chapter 1740. The biggest feature of Elucia's wedding gown was its various hollowness and gold trimming. It fully displayed the Bara family's wealth. As for Jaina, her low-cut wedding dress accentuated her voluptuous figure, second only to Aurelia's. Duque, who's the prettiest among us? If it had been one of them, it would have been devastating. However, when the 4 queens who were about to become brides asked at the same time, Duque was in a bind. Usually, the 4 of them were busy like dogs and the other 3 queens were quite diligent. Although Kalia was a mascot, she preferred to run around Lordaeron, inspecting the people and consoling them. Because they were all busy, they were not like the harem of the emperors on earth, where they were all scheming and scheming. They were usually as close as sisters, and even accompanied Duque in his craziness. It was impossible to say that they did not have a competitive heart. Wasn't this? As soon as the question was asked, they each made a big move. Queen Sylvanas, who had always been domineering, seemed to have finally let go of the hatred in her heart after Arthas's demise. Although she was pregnant now, the crystallization of love between demigods was not that easy to settle. Just the fusion of divinity and the injection of powerful magic would consume a lot of time and energy. Not only was her pregnancy likely to last longer than her sister's, but her belly was also not bulging at all. Without the shocking aura of wanting to kill people all day, Queen Sylvanas exuded the unique allure of a wife. As a matter of fact, Queen Sylvanas, who never liked to be pretentious, actually pulled up the left side of her skirt with one hand, revealing a perfect and beautiful leg. Wow! Long legs? Beside her, Elucia knew that her body proportion could not compete with Queen Sylvanas, and actually shyly turned sideways. Her beautiful back, which was partly hidden by the hollowed-out wedding dress, showed the perfect curve of her butt. Seeing this, Duque's cock moved. Of course, the more exciting thing was yet to come. Without Aurelia, Jaina's Theramore peak was still quite fierce. With a slight bend, under the effect of gravity, the violent beauty of the mass easily blinded Duque's eyes. Everyone was clearly immortal, so why could Jaina still grow and approach Aurelia's level? Among the 4 women, Kalia's figure was the slimmest. Everyone was wondering what kind of sexy pose she would put on. In the end, Kalia didn't pose at all. She just held a bunch of pure white lilies, slightly tilted her head, and revealed a pure and beautiful smile. Oh my God! No matter how many years had passed, Duque would never get tired of looking at that pure beauty that seemed to have solidified for eternity. Alright, here comes the problem. What if King 4 choices? How do you expect Duque to choose? All of you are the prettiest in my heart. Duque decisively chose to muddle through. No. You have to choose one. If you don't choose today, don't even think about leaving. Choose. Duque, no matter who you choose, we won't blame you. The 4 girls attacked Duque from all sides. If Dumuk was still a hot-headed teenager, he might have chosen it on impulse. But in the queen's harem, whoever chose her would be a fool. Do you believe that the alliance will break apart? Since they were starting a harem, they would either have one big and all small, or they would all be big. Aurelia wasn't here to hold the fort. If Duque still dared to give them a high ground, he would be courting death. He couldn't choose. He definitely couldn't choose. Even if he had to endure the 10 great tortures of the Qing dynasty, he couldn't choose. Even though he was surrounded by the white Mount Hyjal, and even though the beautiful faces were as beautiful as flowers, Duque felt like he was living in hell. Just as Duque was about to vent his anger and shout, "If you keep messing around, I won't marry anyone," suddenly, a tremor came from the heavens and the earth. Rumble. This wasn't an adjective. It was a real earthquake. Rumble. Another sound rang out. This time all the women reacted. The two mothers reacted the fastest. Aurelia put a nihilus in a slanted bag, while Sasha hugged Duque's other daughter, Atlanta. They hurried over to meet everyone. Queen Sylvanas was also very fast. She quickly took off her wedding dress and put on her ranger outfit in a few seconds. The other 3 women also changed their clothes in a hurry. Rumble. Continuous tremors came. Duque opened the window and looked out. He saw that there were small cracks on the outer walls of many houses. F***CK. It can't be? Even though Duque had waited for this day for a long time, he didn't expect that this day would come when he was about to get married. Duque, can you feel it? As a demigod of wind, at least half of Queen Sylvanas' mind was maintaining the elemental realm, so she was the most sensitive. She clearly felt that the entire wind elemental realm was restless. I heard Elikir's voice. He's issuing a declaration of challenge to the entire Azeroth. Vashj, who was dressed in a maid's outfit, entered the room and said in a deep voice, "The water elemental realm is a little different." As a demigod directly under Azeroth, Vashj, who was in charge of Lord Emir Lake, was also well aware of the unusual movements in the water elemental realm. Originally, the black dragons were all of the earth attribute. Unfortunately, Onyxia was a different species. She played with fire. She also came, but she smiled bitterly and shook her head. "I can't feel anything." Instead, Duque could feel that his old friend who couldn't hold back his temper in the land of fire let out a deafening roar in that world of fire. "Duque, Marcus, that was a declaration of war." Duque tilted his head slightly. Wind Elemental Lord Al'Akir and Fire Elemental Lord Ragnaros were expected opponents who would come to cause trouble sooner or later. Duque had a doubt. Who gave them the courage to cause trouble when Nesario's grave was already 3 feet high? However, he still had to do what he had to do. In the Holy Light Cathedral of Stormwind City, in a very secret basement, an old man in a white robe led a group of black-robed believers to carry out some kind of evil ritual that was the complete opposite of the Holy Light. The old man raised his hands high and shouted in a passionate voice. "It's here. The long-awaited trial of Twilight is here. Azeroth will return to the rule of the great ancient god. All the creation of the usurper will be destroyed. Only the truly devout can live on after the day of judgment. Only the faceless, the Twilight Dragon, the Eternal Dragon, the elemental creatures, these selected creatures as well as the most devout Twilight believers, can share the glory of the ancient gods in this new world shrouded in shadows." When the fanatical atmosphere was about to sweep the entire basement, suddenly 2 sharp daggers silently stabbed into the back of the old man in a white robe. Chapter 1741. Time seemed to have frozen. At that moment, all the black-robed believers were stunned. The 2 robust figures that jumped out from the seemingly empty air were definitely not mediocre fighters. That was because ordinary bandits would not be able to get close to the white-robed elder. The elder was wearing the robe of the Archbishop of the Holy Light. However, the moment the 2 incomparably sharp daggers pierced his body, the energy that erupted from the old man's body like a raging sea was actually of the shadow attribute. Twilight Shock Wave. This was the signature move of the High Priest of the Twilight Church. Even though the 2 bandits had activated Shadow Cloak and temporarily hid in the shadow plane to avoid this attack, the powerful energy shock still injured them slightly. No one would have thought that the heavily injured elder would be able to switch between the shadow and holy forms like Duke and cast a greater healing spell, in the blink of an eye. It was a pity that his healing magic was interrupted by the 3rd thief who got close to him. The elder's hood was unknowingly shaken off by this kick, revealing a face that was enough to shock countless people. "It's really you, Benedictus." As the situation entered a stalemate, the 3 bandits stopped attacking and pulled down their hoods. They were the Van Cleef father and daughter, as well as the Blood Elf bandit, Valera, who almost never left Varian's side. At the same time, the walls of the entire basement shone brightly. Dozens of teleportation portals opened at the same time, and an entire team of holy knights rushed out from them. Not only were these holy knights powerful professionals who were on the verge of reaching the hero level, but they were also led by the 5 silver saints, Tyrion, Gavin Rad, Riadaline, Iriel, and Merid. Almost all the most powerful clergymen in the entire alliance were here. Tyrion's face was filled with the deepest sorrow. "Why is it you, Benedictus? We used to." Perhaps Benedictus did not give the leaders of the alliance a strong sense of presence. He was undoubtedly one of the oldest members of the alliance's hero squad. As the disciple of the former Archbishop of the Holy Light Alonso's Fail, Benedictus was actually quite famous. It was just that he didn't become a paladin like Uther and the other so-called priests who could fight and tank, so he wasn't as famous. Once upon a time, as a devout priest, Benedictus had lived up to his beliefs. In this life, during the darkest times of the Stormwind during the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, he had pacified the wandering citizens and calmed the panic in their hearts. It could be said that Duque and Anduin were able to quickly assemble a battle-ready army thanks to Benedictus. The people praised him as the incarnation of holy light, and he was the faith of countless people. Together with Duque, Anduin, and Turallion, he held up the sky of hope for the people of Stormwind at that time. After the end of World War II, Archbishop Fail passed away, Duque and Karazhan went missing, and King Lang Rin was assassinated. With his devout faith, he continued to give hope and courage to countless people of Stormwind, and watched over Varian's growth. After Varian grew up, he relied on Benedictus as one of his most trusted advisors and life mentors. He would seek Benedictus' advice on many important matters. At the same time, although Benedictus' reputation among the people grew, he gradually kept a low profile, and began to participate less and less in the political affairs of Stormwind. After Duque returned, he was transferred to the hero squad. However, if Duque hadn't mentioned it, no one would have noticed that Benedictus had shadow force in his body. This elder, who had risen to the position of Archbishop of Stormwind with his seniority, had always claimed that he was only a pure priest of the Holy Church. Duque's seemingly unintentional teasing, "Oh, Benedictus, you've also practiced shadow force?" attracted the attention of MI7 in Stormwind. Recently, there had been a dark force in Stormwind that was promoting the end of the world, and its leader was a powerful Twilight priest. When the leader of MI7, Matthias Shore, asked Duque about it, Duque sold Benedictus out. Hence, the scene of a group of kidney knights surrounding the Twilight believers. The crowd parted, and Varian, who was holding the divine double-edged blade, arrived at the scene of confrontation with Brawl Bearskin. Varian ignored the shivering believers, and looked directly at Benedictus, who was seriously injured on the altar. "Tell me, Benedictus, when did you fall?" Benedictus' face turned pale. He knew that he might not be able to escape this time. If it were Varian and the other two, they might be able to break out of the encirclement by sacrificing some believers. Since the Van Cleef father and daughter were here, it meant that the operation had been approved by Duque. Moreover, apart from Duque, there was no one else who could mobilize such a powerful lineup of kidney knights. He turned his head and looked at the dark dome of the basement. There were several elemental auras in that direction that were so strong that anyone with a little elemental sensitivity could sense them. Benedictus did not answer the question. "Duke Marcus, you're really good at scheming. You knew it from the start, and yet you let me work for nothing for so many years?" The Archbishop of Twilight Light was right. Duque was just that shameless. Who asked the Alliance Hero Squad to have a hard time finding a priest back then? Now that Kalia and Sally Whitemane had grown up, and there was also Fail, the elemental emissary, Benedictus dared to jump out, and so did Duque. Of course, with Benedictus's level, there was no need for Duque or those demigods to do anything. In the basement, Varian was furious. "Answer me, answer? Why should I answer? Doesn't Duke Marcus still know how to use shadow energy?" Benedictus's old and kind face revealed a sinister and cunning look that did not match his temperament. "Don't confuse them. We all know that Duque has fallen into Archimonde's trap, and that's why he has no choice but to use shadow energy." Theon the Honest was furious. Surging waves of holy light spread from under his feet, and several Twilight Light believers were bathed in flames. They screamed and fell to the ground. For the ancient gods. Benedictus suddenly raised his hands, and all the Twilight Light believers began a desperate, suicidal charge towards Varian and the others. There was no suspense in this battle. Apart from Benedictus, there were only two people present who could fight. One was the elemental creature Aquilian, and the other was the blood elf bounty hunter Ashila Lemmingstar. If they were left alone, they might cause a lot of damage. But in this situation where the big shots of the Alliance had teamed up, their resistance would only cause a small ripple before they were completely drowned by the holy light. Chapter 1742. Throughout the history of the Alliance and the Horde in Azeroth, many major losses were caused by traitors. As the saying went, the strongest fortress was often the easiest to break through from within. The original version of the Gate of Heaven's Wrath was like this, and the Twilight Hammer in the Cataclysm was also like this. With Dumuk, a transmigrator, traitors were like ants in a cage. If they dared to jump around, they would be drowned in a pig's cage at any time. Considering that Benedictus was one of the most popular bishops of the Holy Light after Alonso's fail, William couldn't bear to reveal all of his secrets to the public. An hour later, Stormwind officially announced that Archbishop Benedictus had been ambushed during the battle with the ancient god Yogg-Saron. After his mind was eroded, he joined the Twilight Hammer, a subordinate organization of the ancient god. When he came to his senses, he was besieged by the Twilight believers and died in battle. When people learned that even guardians like Tarim and Freya had been brainwashed in that battle, they suddenly felt that Benedictus's fall could be accepted. People felt sad and regretful, and thousands of people even spontaneously organized to pray for Benedictus's death. This was also a way to protect the reputation of Stormwind, the Church of Holy Light, and even Benedictus himself. The Northern Expedition Coalition army had already given the song Bleak to the evil Yogg-Saron, so naturally, there was a silly dragon who took the blame. Regardless of whether the Twilight believers believed it or not, the Alliance believed it. Even Duque was surprised by this outcome. The wedding was supposed to be held tomorrow, but the invasion of the elemental creatures was imminent. This wedding was destined to be cancelled. Goddamn Elemental Lord. You're Alec here, right? Let's settle our old and new grudges. Queen Sylvanas was the most emotional. She had finally let go of her hatred and was ready to settle down as a wife, but Queen Sylvanas lost her temper and no one could stop her. Son. Yeah, she had temporarily sealed her god. Be good, baby. When your mom overturns Al-Aikir, I'll give him to you after I purify his elements. Servana's words made Duque pray for Al-Aikir in his heart. If Queen Syriana really gave birth to a child after defeating Al-Aikir and obtaining the complete share of the wind element, the child would probably be the strongest windrunner in history. The queens had agreed with Duque that their firstborn children would all follow their mother's surname in order to inherit the throne. If he had another child, it would be like Aurelia and Sasha's daughter, who would take Duque's surname as Marcus. The four queens were so angry that they gritted their teeth. At the same time, they were secretly glad that the ancient gods did not cause trouble on the 1st of October. Otherwise, it would have turned into a bloody wedding. That would have been a lifetime of regret. One must know that their entire life, if nothing unexpected happens, would be infinite. At the same time that the wedding was cancelled, the entire Alliance entered a state of alert. As an ally of the Alliance, the Horde also received the notification. The tribe was a pain in the ass. The Horde's recent situation was still quite bad. It was very likely that the cataclysm was coming, causing the elements to be in disorder and the weather to be abnormal. The Horde's food shortage was still very big this year. In the Battle of Northrend at the beginning of the year, the Horde lost 200,000 young adults, which to some extent alleviated the pressure of food shortage. However, the young adults were the main fighting force and labor force. After all, it was a very sad thing to lose them. If it was possible, Sal would rather it be the 200,000 people over 50 who died. After 50 years of age, the Beastmen's fighting power would decline sharply, and they would basically become the burden of the tribe. According to tradition, this part of the Beastmen would be abandoned by the tribe. Perhaps they would fight day after day on the front lines of hunting dangerous creatures to prove themselves, or perhaps they would die silently in the process. However, after the influx of ideas from the Alliance, the tribe gradually changed. The old people, or the Beastmen who were about to step into the age of the elderly, started to question why the Alliance could provide for the elderly but not the Horde. The Alliance had a perfect retirement system. The retired veterans would first receive a retirement compensation that was enough for them to build a small house with a garden in their hometown. In addition, they could also enjoy a generous monthly allowance for up to 36 months. Then, the government of the place where the veterans were registered had the obligation to provide re-employment training. From simple town patrols to training in all kinds of professional skills. As long as they were willing, the local factories had to give priority to hiring retired veterans as workers. If they wanted to do business, they could also get a warehouse for train carriages at a discounted price, or buy old warships or transport ships that the Alliance had retired at the lowest price. Many veterans did not lack courage. It was these veterans who drove old warships and transport ships to support the campaign against the Lich King. During the war, retired veterans contributed in this way. Once they entered peaceful times, they would also enjoy the most preferential tax rates and various tax rebates. Duque had used a policy that surpassed the times and was closely integrated with the war to revitalize the entire alliance. People always sought benefits. Seeing this, the old beastmen also asked Sal to implement a similar policy. Unfortunately, the Alliance and the Horde were born with different economic structures, and the Horde did not have the luxury to play with this kind of welfare system. In recent months, there had been no foreign war to divert the attention of the Horde, and internal conflicts could be said to have escalated again. The traditional beastmen from Draenor Nagrand once again advocated expansion, and this gave Sal a headache. Those crude and ignorant traditional beastmen did not know that with the current power ratio of the Alliance Horde, once a war broke out, it was likely that the Horde would be completely erased from the map of Azeroth within a few months. But Sal did not have the time to care about those traditionalists. Because people from the Ring of Earth had come. The Ring of Earth was a shaman organization in the world of Azeroth. Contrary to what some people thought, the Ring of Earth was not established to fight the Twilight Hammer, especially those conflicts that had recently escalated. The purpose of the organization was actually to suppress the elemental spirits. These elemental spirits contained chaos and destruction in their nature, but they also had rational and intelligent behavior. The Tauren had their own shaman race a long time ago, but the Ring of Earth itself was indeed established recently. Outsiders only noticed the existence of the Ring of Earth about 150 years ago. The original shamans who created the Ring of Earth believed that someone had to prevent the destruction caused by the elemental spirits' anger. Otherwise, the entire plane would be in great danger. Therefore, after countless meetings and agreements, they formed the Ring of Earth of today. Chapter 1743. In the past years, the organization, although originally composed only of Tauren, began to accept orcs, and the proportion continued to increase. The two races each accounted for half of it. Although the members of the Ring of the Earth were not particularly active in the past years, the Third Battle of the Dark Portal, because of the Archimonde invasion, weakened the barrier of the world of Azeroth, and the activities of the elementals continued to increase. In fact, the Ring of the Earth had never been as important as it was now. The members of the organization worked hard to calm the elementals down to ensure that they would not cause more trouble for Azeroth. Today, the Ring of the Earth brought a very serious alert. The elementals were likely to invade Azeroth and launch attacks on all large intelligent life forms. This was not an alarmist, because recently there had been constant reports from patrols that fire elementals, which had never appeared in Duroder, wandered aimlessly from time to time. They attacked livestock in villages as well as travelers passing by. If that was the case, it would not be worth Sal's anxiety. Wajin found Sal and said nervously, "There is something you'd better see for yourself. It's not far, just inside Orgrimmar." Under Wajin's lead, Sal led Varrock and a few guards to sneak into the dark alley area. "Great Chief here?" The one who waved to Sal was one of the few orc thieves in the tribe. Sal recognized him. He was Goddard, who usually worked as a thief trainer in Orgrimmar. Not far from Goddard was the goblin thief Vessi. Under Goddard's guidance, Thrall stepped onto a rough and thick roof. Although the houses of the tribe were not beautiful, they were definitely comparable to the fortresses of the Alliance. A group of people walked on top of a wooden house, and at most they could hear the creaking sounds. In the natural valley of the dark alley area, the wind that poured into the valley always blew all kinds of sounds from the wooden houses. Vessi pointed downwards. It was not difficult. Sal noticed the troll in a strange dark blue robe, who was giving a speech in a corner of the alley. Dozens of orcs, trolls, and even the rarely seen forgotten ones were surrounding the troll and listening. "The earth is angry. The supreme ancient god will give the most resolute response to the provocation of mortals. The fire elementals hovering outside Orgrimmar are the best sign." One of the residents of Orgrimmar shouted, "I don't want to die. Doomsayer, what do you tell us?" The one called the Doomsayer spoke in a low and bewitching voice, "People of Orgrimmar, listen carefully. We have been deceived for too long. I demand that you open your eyes and see the truth." At this point he raised his arms high. "Brothers and sisters, the end of the world was coming. Azeroth will no longer exist." Following his shout, a faint flame rose from his arms. The surrounding residents were shocked and subconsciously took 2 steps back. However, they realized that the flame did not cause any damage to the doomsayer. The flames seemed to have become a part of his body. After all, even mages couldn't really let the flames flow on their skin, but this person could. The doomsday prophet's voice grew more agitated. The flames will devour this world. The storm would sweep away all hope. In the end, the elements will rule everything. One of the orcs mustered up his courage and asked, "Why should we believe you?" The doomsayer pointed a finger with sharp nails at the orc, a fanatical expression on his face. "Soon you will see the sign I spoke of. When that time comes, do not despair, people of Orgrimmar. Join us and learn the truth." He raised his hands again. "Abandon a life full of war and hard labor, be reborn in the elements and take your rightful place in the new world." When the guy below said this, Varrock could not help but say, "Great Chief, I will go arrest and hang this guy." "Great Chief, do it. We have already found many of them. If we let them do as they please, Orgrimmar will fall into panic," Goddard said in a low voice. Thrall waved his hand and stopped his most loyal companions and subordinates. "First, monitor and find all the doomsayers." "Yes, sir," Thrall's subordinates said in unison. Thrall returned to the Wisdom Valley looking a little lonely. He looked at Wajin beside him and suddenly said, "There are many of these people in the Alliance, right?" "Many. But it's useless," Wajin pointed out. Thrall's body trembled. He felt a deep sense of powerlessness and guilt. Whether it was a country or an organization, the more turbulent it was, the easier it was for evil people to come out and stir up trouble. The damn doomsayers could be so popular in the Horde, which had a lot to do with the poor economic situation of the Horde. People living in the abyss of suffering would naturally change. "Am I a bad chief?" Sal seemed to ask Woking without thinking. "No. There is no such thing," Wajin said firmly. He felt a bad sign and immediately realized that he had to nip Thrall's bad idea in the bud. "Great Chief, no, Thrall. No one is more suitable to be the chief than you. This is not just my idea. You can ask most of the people in the Horde, they all love you. The current situation of the Horde is not your fault. Then tell me, why is the gap between the Alliance and the Horde getting wider and wider?" Thrall looked at the dark sky blankly. Wajin wanted to lie, but he realized that even if it was a white lie, it would not have any effect on the wise and rational chief. He was discouraged. That's the leader of the Alliance, Duke Marcus? That's too much. If it was anyone else, they probably wouldn't be able to achieve such results." "Really? It's not that I'm not good, it's that Duke is better." Thrall's mouth was full of bitterness, but more of a sense of loss for himself and the future of the Horde. Wajin was right. There were also many Twilight believers within the Alliance. They avoided the main cities of the Alliance and gave speeches in various towns and villages. There were many people who listened and some even smiled at them. But there was always an inexplicable meaning in every smile. It was not malicious, but people always felt like they were looking at a group of worthless dead people. Most of the Twilight believers shuddered inexplicably. The natural fanaticism and excitement in them quickly cooled down under the gaze. They suddenly had an intuition that they might not be able to easily stir up chaos and recruit believers in the Alliance. Chapter 1744. In the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City, Duke had used close to 100 magic mirrors to turn his mansion's main hall into a control center that was even more powerful than the Alliance's headquarters. The 100 or so images were just the bird's eye view of the important cities of the Alliance. In each large image, there were a dozen or even hundreds of smaller images attached to it. As long as Duke used his divine sense, he could immediately pull them out and take a closer look. In fact, in Karazhan, which was connected to the Weave, Karthika was currently commanding 7 or 8 radiant moons and close to 100 morning rank Einherjars to monitor the situation of the Twilight believers. Most of these Einherjars were Alliance mages who had died after Duque became a demigod. Perhaps it was because their lifespans had come to an end, or perhaps they had died on the battlefield, but they firmly believed that people like them would not be able to go to heaven. Thus, they became Duque's subordinates as Einherjars and became a part of the Weave. As a demigod of the Weave, Duque was becoming more and more like a god. It was a pity that this demigod, who should have been high and mighty, was doing something that did not match up with him. "I'll just quietly watch you act cool. I've never interrupted you. You can destroy everything in seconds. Your parents are afraid of you." Duque made his 2 daughters giggle as he sang an unreliable song. However, the 2 mothers were speechless. While it was good for daughters to be close to their fathers, they felt that if Duque took care of all the education, the beautiful elf girls would be led astray by Duque before they were even 3 years old. Yes, in theory these two girls were half human and half elf. Because Duke had the body of a demigod, he was able to impregnate the two girls, so technically speaking, the two little girls should be demigods and half-elves. That made the two babies look completely like high-elven babies with no human characteristics at all. What was interesting was that even though Illyria had a head of brilliant blonde hair, Enilus had silver hair that was almost as white as Sasha's. Atlanta had blonde hair. It could only be said that the genes of the Windrunner family in terms of hair color were clearly divided into two shades, pure gold and pure silver. The only difference was when it was revealed as a dominant gene. Aurelia was worried that if the child didn't resemble Duque, Duque would have a problem with it. Duque didn't think much of it. Of course a girl should resemble her mother. Look at me, compared to the elves, I'm a typical long-waisted, short-legged person. This kind of girl won't be able to charm men when she grows up. After playing with his daughter, Duque looked at his woman's Mount Hyjal, which was obviously a size bigger than before. He bared his teeth and went into work mode. The family left, and an existence that rarely appeared in front of Duque appeared. Greetings, master. Queen Saloras, who had typical demon goat horns and skin that was even darker purple, knelt on one knee. Duque waved his hand. I'll give you the souls of those scum. Pry something out of Benedettas for me later. With one sentence, he decided the fate of thousands of Twilight believers active in the Alliance. That was the power of the Alliance commander. Saloras was quite excited. This was the first time that Duque had publicly rewarded them with souls. After relying on Duque for so long, the twins were almost suffocated. As for Benedettas, he was indeed dead. But his soul couldn't be freed, and Duque secretly caught it on the spot. The Twilight Hammer didn't have a particularly powerful leader. On the Alliance's side, it was Benedettas, and on the Horde's side, it was the two-headed ogre's boss, Gujar. Duque wasn't interested in Gujar. Even if the Alliance got rid of Benedettas, it wouldn't be a problem. After 2 days of observation, Duque finally lost patience with the weak Twilight Hammer. The only thing that Duque cared about was what the trump card of the ancient gods was. In just an hour, Queen Saloras gave the answer, Deathwing Nisario. It was an unsurprising and unreliable answer. Duke's brows furrowed into a crease. It didn't make sense. The reason was simple. Deathwing had been dead for a long time. If it was still like in history and Nisario only faked his death to avoid capture, then at this point in time Deathwing, who had the full support of the only remaining ancient god, was very strong. As the final boss of the Cataclysm, Deathwing, who had been blessed by the ancient gods, was so strong that it even jumped out of the cycle of life. In order to successfully surround and kill Nisario, the other dragons paid a huge price and eventually lost their divine power. However, the Neltharion of this life was obviously not up to the task. The abilities of any death dragon would be greatly reduced. For example, when Malygos turned into a Dracolic, although it preserved his demigod-level spellcasting ability, more than half of the powerful dragon body's power was cut off. This directly caused Duque to stop using magic and switch to melee combat. Not only was Deathwing killed, but even its dragon head was used by Malygos back then. It might have even been used as a chamber pot. Its skin and flesh had been dismantled into parts. Even if the ancient gods resurrected it as a ghost dragon or a bone dragon, its level would be the same. Duque didn't even need to call for help. He could single-handedly kill Nisario in the form of a bone dragon. Moreover, Nisario's soul had already been ruthlessly played by Duque, and then suppressed by the Dragon Sleep Temple. It had long been worn down. Even if Enzos and the other ancient gods still retained a part of Deathwing's soul, it wouldn't be enough. In conclusion, Nisario was definitely not qualified to be a trump card. Duque crossed his legs, rested his chin on his left hand, and tapped the armrest of the chair rhythmically with the index finger of his right hand. He fell into deep thought. Queen Saloras showed a charming smile. She crawled over and gently massaged Duque's calf. Master, have you forgotten something? Go ahead. Duque calmly glanced at the demoness. The individual of the living and the individual of the undead are not the same concept. For example, abomination. Duque was suddenly moved. Yes. All this while, his thinking had fallen into a blind spot. He had always believed that if the Cataclysm was still represented by Deathwing, Nisario, then it must be Nisario as the final boss. He had forgotten. Since he could dismantle Deathwing into parts, the ancient gods could also put these parts back together, and even add more unexpected new parts. Duque stood up and smiled at Saloras. You did well, I'll reward you with this. After saying that, Duque directly threw Hethan's tentacle to the demoness, whose expression had changed drastically. Then Duque directly called out with his soul, "Onyxia, come to me, I have an important task for you." Chapter 1745. Hey master, you called me? Onyxia walked briskly into Duque's room. What are you going to do today? The balcony? The bathroom? The hall? Or the kitchen? The black dragon girl who had transformed into Countess Katrana pulled up her skirt seductively, revealing her fair calves. Duque was speechless. It was all his fault. He had tamed too many dragons and the dragons were tamed. It was just that he was too unscrupulous and used all his tricks. The result was that the scheming dragon who had tried to overthrow Stormwind was turned into a secretary dragon. If there was something to do, he would do it with his mount. Ahem. Duke pretended to be serious and coughed twice, then sternly said, "Onyxia, have you realized that you used to dare to argue with anyone? Now you can't even beat anyone of the same rank?" Onyxia's face, which was originally a mix of charm and nobility, suddenly changed. "Master, are you tired of me?" A cross-shaped vein appeared on Duque's forehead. "No. What I mean is, you are about to see your original fate." The black dragon princess felt her heart suddenly contract violently. In the original future, you and your brother will become the same existence, a zombie dragon. I think it won't be long before you see him again. Onyxia was finally afraid when Duque mentioned Nefarian. She knelt on the spot and prostrated in front of Duque. "Thank you for your pity, master." Duque did not comfort her anymore. The pity of a true demigod is never cheap. You can only obtain my pity because you have at least given your loyalty. That's right. It was already a miracle to make a powerful black dragon, who was originally insidious and cunning, give her loyalty. In the end, Duke, who was still a little disappointed and wanted to give her a warning. She also knew that she was lazy and lacked motivation. She thought that she could rely on her natural demigod body to survive. Now it seemed that Duque was not satisfied. I will work hard in the future. In the past, I treated you as my mount mainly because I was worried and because of my vanity. After being conferred as a god for so long, I'm also indifferent to it. Azeroth and the Burning Legion would eventually have a decisive battle. When the time comes, you'll have to take charge. Duque paused. You've proven your loyalty. It's time to prove your courage. Courage? Originally, the Black Dragon didn't need any courage. After all, Black Dragons were already at the top of the Azeroth food chain. If there was anything that Onyxia was afraid of, it would be her father, Nesario. Hearing Duque's words, Onyxia shivered instinctively. But she soon calmed down again. Perhaps her father was indeed very strong and crazy. So what? If Master can kill him once, then she can kill him a second time, a third time, countless times. Onyxia didn't know why she came to such a magical conclusion. Obviously she had become confident. She shouted in her heart, "Yes. My master holds the fate of the entire Azeroth in his hands. He is the god of fate. There is no existence that can compete with the god of fate. Even my once invincible father can't do it." Thinking of this, the look in her eyes changed from confidence to incomparable determination. "Master, I won't let you down." After saying that, like a docile cat, she took Duque's left hand, rubbed it on her smooth face and then left. Duke's gaze sharpened as he watched Onyxia's silhouette disappear into the distance. His gaze seemed to transcend time and space across the plane barrier, and saw the earth elemental plane, in the isolated temple in the stony continent, a certain fallen guardian dragon that had long been torn apart. The wings of death alone could no longer cause any trouble. Duque clearly remembered that Nefarian's corpse had disappeared. There was a moment when, under the hint of Queen Saloras, Duque almost thought that N'Zoth wanted to mess up the Wings of Death family. For example, Nefarian's body, and then the heads of Nethario and his wife. Something like a three-headed dragon that was quite cute. It was also very cool. Duque soon felt that this was not reliable. It was very simple. If they really played the three-headed dragon as one, then whose body would be the main one? The Wings of Death's body had long been reduced to ashes, leaving only the dragon head that was relatively intact. Whether it was Nefarian or Sinestra, there was an absolute difference in size compared to the Wings of Death's body. If either of their bodies were used as the torso, it would only be a weakening, not a strengthening. Such a method of neglecting the essentials was not advisable. If N'Zoth really did this, Duque would be very happy to get rid of Nethario again and enjoy the greatest dragon-slaying achievement alone. Now Nethario was waiting quietly, brewing his hatred for Duque and all the low-level creatures on the surface, waiting for the time to use the fire of resurrection to devour the world again. Wasn't Duque already set up everything and waiting for Nethario to deliver himself to him? Make your move, I can't wait anymore. As in history, the first to make a move was the Twilight Church. On the Alliance's side, although Duque had long used the magic net to monitor the movements of many Twilight believers, Saloras had interrogated Benedictus, the leader of the Twilight Church in the Alliance, and obtained a more detailed and high-level list. The Alliance's purge of the Twilight believers went quite smoothly. The Alliance's internal economy and people's livelihood were good, so there was no place for the Doomsday Church to spread. Coupled with the Alliance's decapitation strategy, the Twilight riot on the Alliance's side ended before it even started. Many people did not even know that the Twilight believers had been killed. Instead, they were surprised by the Alliance's military control. Occasionally, elemental creatures began to attack the Alliance's main cities, but did they really think that Duque's arrangements were for nothing? There were 4 guards of the Alcafon's treasury, plus 2 Odal guardians. If there were so many powerful beings in charge, the Alliance's main cities would still be able to overturn the sky with elemental creatures. In that case, Duque would not be able to survive. Compared to the peace of the Alliance, the Horde was in a terrible situation. Sal wanted to cast a net and wait for the Twilight believers to contact the higher-level core figures so that he could catch them all in one fell swoop. Unexpectedly, perhaps the death of Benedictus had triggered the nerves of the twin-headed ogre Google. Google had actually made his move ahead of time. When Thrall heard Orgrimmar's alarm and rushed out of the Great Chief's palace, he was shocked to see that Orgrimmar stood in the middle of the mountains. Amidst the scattered mountains he could see no less than 30 giant portals. Countless fire elemental creatures rushed out and wantonly destroyed everything in Agrima. Chapter 1746. No, Sal shouted subconsciously. Agrima was the fruit of his hard work for more than 10 years. From the time he led the enslaved orcs to the uprising in Goldenhold Castle, to crossing the endless sea to the Kalimdor continent despite the encirclement of both the humans and the Scourge army, he led the tribe from a pitiful 100,000 people to the present day, with several main warring races and over 3 million people. Agrima was the testimony of the tribe's unyielding glory. Seeing Agrima being swallowed by the sea of fire, Sal felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. He used to think that using wood as the main building material for the city was a great feat in line with the orc tradition and aesthetics. He still remembered that in the 15th year of the Dark Portal, Thrall had ordered Grom Hellscream to bring his Warsong clan to the Grey Valley in order to have enough wood to build a city. He didn't hesitate to start a war with the Night Elves to snatch the wood. Who knew that 11 years had passed? At this moment, Sal could not wait for the orcs to improve. For example, they could learn from the Alliance and build the whole city with bricks and cement like Stormwind City. Wood is the best kindling material. Why don't you burn the cement with fire? What made Sal's heart hurt the most was the behavior of the people of Agrima. At the entrance of the Wisdom Valley not far away, Sal saw with his own eyes an Agrima guard rush to the violent fire elemental creatures. He did not fight the invaders bravely with his battle axe, but knelt down and worshipped them. Great elements. I beg you, accept me and let me have a place in the new world ruled by the elements. Obviously, this guard had been brainwashed by the Twilight believers. Ah. The guard had clearly screamed and turned into a lump of charcoal, but the Twilight believers were still crazily advocating. He has been accepted by the elements. He has become a part of the fire. More and more people of Agrima began to believe the Twilight Church's words. This was a sign. The world would be destroyed by the fire. They no longer resisted, no longer united. Instead, their minds wavered as they did not know if they should join the ranks of the Twilight believers. The elements are going berserk. We must appease them immediately. Otherwise, Agrima is finished. A member of the Ring of Earth shouted. It sounded, in a way, rather pedantic to Dworkin. Whoever dares to attack our main city will be attacked. This was the right way to handle things in the tribe. Unfortunately, he could not do it. The Horde was not the Alliance. They did not have the brick houses of the Alliance, nor did they have a complete fire system. With most of the Forsaken on their knees, and even an Astrian who had returned, was ordered to meditate in isolation, the Horde lacked mages. Furthermore, there was no weave that could provide an endless supply of mana to mages. With the shaman's way of doing things, pacifying the violent fire elemental creatures was the only choice. Elula Balala. The shamans shook their heads, using incantations and postures that were similar to dancing to communicate with the rampaging fire elements. Although it seemed unreliable, the effect was obvious. Destroy. Destroy. Burn everything to ashes. Burn. Burn. The shamans heard the voice of the fire elementals. Thrall and all the shamans in Orgrimmar tried their best to calm the elements, but only a small portion of them were able to calm down. Great Chieftain, no. We can't hold on much longer, cried Varrock pessimistically. That was because more than a third of the buildings in the city had been burned. Even though all the beams and pillars of the main buildings had been fireproofed. Unfortunately, that level of fireproofing was still useless in the ultra-high temperature. Seeing that the city would fall into a sea of fire and turn into ruins, Thrall finally couldn't take it anymore. That's right, he had one last trump card. Ever since he returned to Nagrand and learned the path of shamanism under the guidance of Gaen's grandmother, Thrall had been able to impose his will on the elements after awakening his senses and power of nature from a warrior who only knew how to hack and slash. The problem was that it was a kind of slavery equivalent to the warlocks enslaving demons. This went against the tenet of the Ring of Earth. However, seeing that the entire Orgrimmar was about to be destroyed, Thrall finally couldn't take it anymore. In the name of nature Shaman Gael, I command all fire elementals to stop your attacks. When his surging spiritual power spread across the entire Orgrimmar with him as the center, he could clearly feel the resistance of the fire elementals. Refuse? Non-elemental creatures should be destroyed. We will not take orders from a non-elemental. A tear fell from the corner of Thrall's eye. I command you, stop. In the spiritual world, Thrall's voice was like thunder from the ninth heaven. Every fire elemental seemed to have heard the absolute command from the fire elemental lord, Ragnaros. Even though they were unwilling, they still stopped and stood where they were. It stopped. Sal panted heavily. He had used his own power to force the elements to submit. This method had succeeded, but he was not happy at all. Thrall looked into the distance and felt the resistance of the elements. For the first time, he had a deep feeling. The shaman's power seemed to no longer be able to summon and control the violent elements. Thrall had an idea. At this moment in Ironstove Castle, the dwarves were engaged in a small-scale offensive and defensive battle. The dwarves had brought a large number of cannons, ranging from direct 88mm cannons to curved mortars. In their own way, the dwarves destroyed the earth elemental creatures attacking Ironstove Castle. As the most thick-skinned of the four major elements, the tenacity of the earth elemental creatures greatly exceeded Magni's expectations. Fortunately, there was Rock Warden Alcavan here. This 10-story tall supergiant did not even need to make a move. He sat in front of the Ironstove Castle, which seemed incomparably majestic to mortals. No earth elemental could break through his line of defense. Almost every earth elemental that came within 100 meters of his body would immediately prostrate on the ground and acknowledge Alcavan as their supreme ruler. Magni complained at the side, "Oh my god, what the hell are these earth elementals up to?" Although Duque informed us that it was likely that the former Nesario was conspiring to destroy all of Azeroth, is this really Nesario's doing? Or is even the earth elemental lord involved in this damned attack? Alcavan shook his huge head. There is no doubt that Therazane, the Mother of Stone, is a powerful existence, but she is the most peaceful of the elemental lords. She is very patient and has great love for the creatures that live on the earth, and likes to spend relaxing time with the creatures that nest on her. She is at war with the other elemental lords. I don't think she would participate in an attack that would destroy the world. Chapter 1747. If the Stone Mother doesn't come out, who will? Magni answered his own question. Let me think. Ragnaros will definitely come out. His grudge with Duque. But if he comes, it won't be my turn to deal with him. Duque will take care of it himself. As a creation of the Titans who had participated in that shocking ancient war, as well as a guardian who had lived in this world for more than 25,000 years, Archavon himself was a living history book. Perhaps it was the wind elemental lord Elakir. As for the Tidehunter Neptulin, it's hard to say. Then what can I do? Magni continued his analysis. Servanas will probably be in charge of the wind elemental. She'll be looking for Alakir to snatch the authority of the wind elemental. As for the water elemental, it definitely won't be my turn. Most likely Vashj will be in charge. Archavon said in a low voice. Now, the spatial barrier between the four major elemental realms and Azeroth is already very weak. It's not surprising that the ancient gods would encourage the elemental lords to participate in the attack on Azeroth. Since the Alliance has such a leader with foresight and made arrangements in advance, I suggest that you think of a way to increase your strength. Then I suggest that you think of a way to increase your strength. I'm already at the peak of mortal strength. Magni was a little embarrassed. As a legendary heroic warrior, his strength in the mortal world could no longer increase. Then cross the line between humans and gods. Magni, you have the talent. Archavon encouraged the dwarf king. At this moment, Muradin interrupted, yes. Brother, think about it. The Burning Legion, the ancient gods, I feel that the enemies we have to face are getting stronger and stronger. The next time Kill Jaden comes, he might not be weakened. But it will take a long time. I'm an earth elemental and it takes a lot of time for us to level up. And I still have my duty as a king. Magni hesitated. At the mention of this, both Muradin and Bu Lang shut up at the same time. The matter of royal power had always been taboo. Alcavan, however, didn't feel this way. This overseer giant didn't sense the change in the atmosphere at all. He continued to speak bluntly, think about it. There is an opportunity right now. If Nesario was the culprit behind this cataclysm, in that case it couldn't stay in the deep rock continent forever. Once it comes out, there will be a vacuum period for your soul to float into the deep rock continent and undergo the final test. It had to be said that Magni was tempted. The brothers and all the dwarves trusted Duque. This did not mean that they would accept being in a weak position in the alliance. Now the elf was ahead of them. Regardless of whether it was the blood elf Queen Sylvana's status as a demigod or Tyron's status as an oracle, the elves had a lot of say in the alliance. Moreover, the two leaders of the elves were Duque's women. With such a close relationship, be it the night elves or the blood elves, their positions in the alliance were incomparably firm. If Magni could become a demigod, then the dwarves' political status would undoubtedly be greatly enhanced. Different statuses and different situations determined that even the same person would make different decisions. If this was the original history, Magna, who had no idea what was going on, would have sought to harmonize with the earth when he saw the four elements going berserk. In the end, without leaving any so-called will or arrangements, he turned into a sturdy stone statue. This caused the Iron Furnace Castle to fall into serious political chaos. In the end, his daughter, Moira Bronzebeard, stole power as the acting queen of the Black Iron Dwarves. Even after Magni returned as a demigod, he couldn't change the fact that Moira was the leader of the three dwarves. It was just that Moira saw the situation clearly and cleared her name. That was the end. In this life, the situation was naturally different. Muradin. Muradin was suddenly called out by Magni, and was a little stunned. If the opportunity that Alcavan mentioned really appears, I will give it a try. When that time comes, the Iron Furnace Castle will be handed over to you. Muradin, you will be the next king. Magni wasn't an idiot. When he challenged Alcavan, Duque had already made arrangements. Even if Duque didn't say it, he knew that Duque didn't like Moira. For example, he was just conflicted about Moira, but Duque was basically targeting him. In this current situation, if Moira really came to inherit the throne of the Iron Furnace Castle, it would definitely be the nightmare of the Bronzebeard dwarves. Duque had been at the helm of the alliance for 11 years, and had already integrated the entire alliance's economy. A country without any specialties or special relationships with a few rich countries would only be marginalized. Take the current Stromgarde for example. Although the alliance supported the reconstruction of the torrential castle, without large amounts of funds and project support, this once only birthplace of a human empire in history would still be like a stone by the roadside, dispensable. In comparison, Rotterdam was once almost destroyed. More than half of the land was rotted by natural disasters, and was covered in plagues. But with Kalia's connections, the Marcus family, Alterac family and Kurtira's family worked together. In addition, Tyrant almost pulled all the Cenarian Circle druids over to work. In 10 years, they forcefully rebuilt the ruined Rotterdam into a top country in the alliance. Hence, with the combination of internal and external factors, Magni almost didn't hesitate to choose his second brother to be the next king. At this moment, Muradin was also dumbfounded. Wait, big brother, I'll be the regent. Just like Bolivar Fortigen. Nonsense. We dwarves don't have so many things that are not straightforward. Since Moira isn't suitable, and third brother always wants to go on adventures, then there's no difference between you being king and me. Furthermore, my goal is to become the world's strongest warrior and blacksmith. Instead of letting our brethren worry about a king who might fail to become a demigod, it's better to let go of this burden early. Even if something happens in the future, the impact won't be that bad. Looking at his big brother who was fuming with anger, Muradin also understood. For the dwarves, this was indeed the best way to deal with it. Becoming a demigod was not without risks. On the contrary, the risks were unimaginably high. If Muradin really died, then the death of a king or the loss of a prince would have a greater impact on the country and its people. On the other hand, if Muradin stepped down, once he succeeded in becoming a demigod, that leverage could still be added to the dwarves. The dwarves were all hot-tempered. As long as they made up their minds and the other party didn't accept it, they would most likely use their fists to make the other party accept it. Chapter 1748. Second brother, what are you hesitating for? Big brother has made a decision. And between you and me, there's no need to say who is more suitable. Bulang also persuaded Muradin. Okay. When Big Brother decides to promote, I will take over as king. Without further ado, Muradin agreed. That's my good brother. The three Bronzebeard brothers laughed, put their arms around each other's shoulders and ran off to drink. The alliance, which had been prepared for this cataclysm, could be said to have dealt with the rampaging elements without much effort. The magic net throughout the alliance was the best surveillance and command system. Developed railway transportation and huge air fleets determined the mobility of the alliance's forces. Almost all large-scale elemental riots were suppressed at the first instance. The fire demon troops led by Majordomo Executus, who was loyal to Duque, performed blindingly in this commotion. The fire elementals were setting fires, and he and his fire demons caught fire elementals as easily as hunting in the zoo. They could suppress fire elementals with a wave of their hands. Fire elementals were setting fires everywhere? The fire demons also absorbed all the fire elementals into their bodies. The fire demons were also fire elementals. For them, fire was the same thing as food and water for humans. They didn't even need fire engines, they just ate all the flames and called it a day. Without the most destructive fire elementals, the remaining wind elementals were not so destructive. Since Duque took charge in the alliance, he began to vigorously promote the use of reinforced concrete to build houses. In order to prevent the red bricks from destroying the arable land, Duque had created the hollow bricks early on. The biggest intention of doing this was to speed up the industrialization of the entire alliance. Incidentally, in order to make most cities in the alliance use reinforced concrete as building materials, Duque even subsidized countries in the name of the alliance so that the cost of building a concrete house was about the same as a wooden house. Now, the power of the concrete house was completely highlighted. Not only was it warm in winter and cool in summer, but it was also waterproof and leak-proof. Now the fire was coming, it won't burn. Swindy, it won't blow. If it was the previous wooden house, even if it was a brick and wood house, who knew how many people would die now? And how many citizens would be homeless? Oh my God. Too amazing. My house was set on fire by a few fire elementals the size of carriages. In the end, only the kitchen was burned. There was a strong wind at my place and even the cows were blown away. Our whole family hid under the bed at home, but the wind didn't even blow the roof away. Concrete houses are amazing. Almost every affected area of the alliance praised Duque's virtuous policies. In fact, Duque was also busy connecting all his subordinates through the weave. Majordomo. Make sure you have men stationed at every major alliance granary. Which granary burned? I'm going to skin him alive. Majordomo bowed in acknowledgement. Saffron, have your men patrol the skies above a few of the famous forests. Elven Forest, Tirisful Woodland, Hillsbrad Hills, Hinterlands, Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest. Every forest must have at least 100 ice dragons. After enduring for so long, Saffron, who had finally regained some consciousness, spoke in the human language, understood. After killing Lich King Arthas, the soul of the blue dragon that had been bound by Frostmourne was freed. Apart from a few who still chose to follow Wuther, most left. About 2/3 of the blue dragons chose to let their souls go back to sleep in the Dragonbone Waste. A third chose to follow Saffron, letting their souls become a part of the weave. In a sense, Duke's ability to rally supporters was mostly due to his status as a demigod. If there was a day in the future when Duque became a true god, then they would also rise with him. At the very least, they would become true god envoys. After following Duque, these ice dragons were no longer pure undead dragons. They appeared in the sky as frost elemental dragons. Duque had an air force directly under him. Although this air force consumed a lot of elemental power, it was still a direct force. And other than the undead, where else could he find an air force that could patrol the mountains and forests 24 hours a day? Suddenly, Duque felt that he was very shameless. Why did he trick a bunch of people, dragons, to work for him for free? Compared to the benefits, the crisis in front of him felt more real. Considering that in history, after a certain wing jumped out, he specially flew to Stormwind City, demolished the King's Valley, destroyed the statues of several heroes, and destroyed the beautiful garden area with his tail. Duque was very unhappy. What if history repeats itself this time? The garden area was destroyed, like a scar forever branded on the beautiful Stormwind City. If Nesario tilted his tail and destroyed Duque's alma mater, the Royal Mage Academy of Stormwind City, that would be a slap in the face to Duque. Therefore, Duque directly transferred Naxxramas to the airspace of Stormwind City. It was to set up an earthquake relief headquarters in Stormwind City for the upcoming cataclysm. According to Duque's judgment, the southern continent would be the main disaster area. With such a grand reason, no one would be able to say the word, no. Duque had long taken advantage of the outbreak of the elemental disaster to evacuate many areas. No one doubted Duque's judgment. After so many years, Duque's wisdom and greatness had long been deeply engraved in the hearts of every Alliance citizen. Because it was an early evacuation, it was not too urgent, and the people still had time and opportunity to pack up. The Alliance also announced that they would start collecting donations to support the people in the affected areas with the dual power of the people and the government, so that they could choose another place to rebuild their homes. This kind of early disaster relief work that could minimize the loss of life and property was unanimously praised by the Alliance from top to bottom. Thank the heavens, the commander of the Alliance is actually a demigod familiar with the elemental domain. The Alliance is so lucky. I'm starting to understand why every queen in the Alliance fell in love with His Excellency Duke Marcus. If it were me, I'd marry him too. Equal wife is equal wife. Everyone praised Duque like this. As an idol commander who was worshipped by thousands, Duque was extremely annoyed. That's right, the post-cataclysm map in his mind had already overlapped with the current map of the Alliance in his spiritual world. He had also taken precautions. The problem was, earthquake prediction was not something that could be done in Azeroth. Even on Earth, where technology and civilization were very advanced, it was a big problem of the century. Seismologists had spent a whole century and had yet to achieve accurate predictions. Why could Duque do it with his memory? What if it was shaken askew? Chapter 1749. Those in power should never put all their eggs in one basket unless they were in dire straits. So what Duque could do was not only avoid the most dangerous areas, evacuate the people and soldiers to relatively safe areas, but also expand the area. For example, Duque clearly remembered that in the game, the Northshire Abbey in the Human Novice Zone, across the river on the east bank, was originally a field full of wolves. However, this area would be completely scorched during the cataclysm. Should people and belongings be evacuated to the Northshire Abbey? Of course not. The evacuation had to be expanded to cover the entire elven forest. Similarly, in the Western Wilderness, now renamed the Western Wilderness, near the Gold Coast mine, there would be a mini volcano called Earthly Rage Fissure. Duque had personally inspected it, and the geological conditions there were indeed relatively weak. It was also a priority area for evacuation. However, people could not be gathered in the Sentinel Territory or Moon Creek town. If possible, when the cataclysm arrived, it was best to evacuate everyone in their families to the vast fields. Only then could they avoid being wiped out altogether. As for the most valuable works of art or important personnel, they would be brought to the two floating cities, the Dalajan and Naxxramas. At the same time, large amounts of food and water were stored on them. If necessary, the two floating cities would be used as the Apocalypse Ark. Duque frowned as he listened to the reports coming in from all over the world. 80% of the evacuation has been completed. The rest will be completed in 3 days, Khadgar reported. Duque asked Lucia in the magic mirror, what about the reaction of the people? Thanks to Master's benevolent governance and trust in the Alliance, it is generally calm. There are no panic buying everywhere. 89% of the people have been settled in the refuge area, and food and water have been prepared for 15 days. Duque turned to Kudrin and asked, what about the Air Force? They have been dispersed. We have also prepared for the worst. If the weave is temporarily cut off, we will restore the traditional communication between the Griffins and the flying warships. The old beacon tower has also been built. At this time, Tyrion Fordring suggested, then Duque, since you can predict the general location of the catastrophe, why don't you tell me? Should we also give the tribe a copy of the information about the changes in the terrain you foresee? Duque fell silent. He closed his eyes and thought for a full 5 seconds before nodding. The integrity of a paladin was a virtue. Unfortunately, this virtue was destined to only be possessed by a few people. A true leader would never be so selfless. However, Duke didn't mind giving Thean face and giving Thrall a final gift. If the historical trend of the tribe could not be reversed, then Sal's days as the great chief had already entered the countdown. To be honest, Duke didn't need to rely on the cataclysm to trick the tribe. The tribe's territory was barren to begin with, so most of the areas were sparsely populated. In the area controlled by Kalimdor's tribe, there wasn't a single city that would be destroyed by the cataclysm. On the contrary, there was a lack of resources in a wide area. When the Alliance's message reached Thrall, he was stunned for a long time. He forcibly suppressed the riot of the fire elements. 1/5 of Orgrimmar had been burned. When he angrily ordered those Twilight believers to be hanged 1,000,000 times, he had no choice but to deal with the devastation of the mess. Hundreds of logging requests were sent to his desk. He knew very well that if he really asked the Alliance for wood according to the demands of this group of animals, the Night Elves would probably go crazy and start a war on the spot. Who knew that in Duke's handwritten letter, he personally informed them that this was probably just the beginning. The western part of Durantal was likely to be flooded by the surging River of Wrath. The Thousand Needles area and the Shining Plains were also likely to be flooded. If this was a nightmare, Thrall would rather he had never fallen asleep. This was really too terrifying. Just as the Alliance had already made preparations, the tribe was waiting for the judgment of the end to come. In the underground palace of the Deep Rock continent in the Earth Elemental Plane, a violent voice that resounded through the entire underground world abruptly rang out. Pain? Suffering? My hatred burns in the abyss. If Duke was here, he would definitely recognize the owner of this voice on the spot. Deathwing Nysario? In this special plane far away from the world of Azeroth, non-Earth elemental creatures without the protection of special energy or Earth elemental magic would be crushed to death by the tide of soil in an instant. Because there was no sky and no water here. There was only endless soil and violent lava rising from time to time. Nysario, who was once extremely arrogant and betrayed the entire dragon race, was now just a pile of broken dragon remains. A hollow dragon head, a spine that only had half of its spine left, a pile of ribs that were broken into at least 3 pieces, and an incomplete tail and claws. The so-called Deathwing was now just a joke. Beside Deathwing there was another huge dragon corpse. That was the corpse of his son who smashed Nefarian. Countless illusory octopus-like tentacles stretched out from the void. Too weak. Too weak. Nysario, you're really too weak. That was the voice of the ancient god Enzos. My master, for the sake of my hatred, give me another chance. Nysario, who was once extremely arrogant, was now just a grandson. This is really the last chance. Enzos let out a cold laugh. A piece of spine suddenly appeared in the void. It looked like the spine was already as big as a small mountain, dozens of times bigger than Nysario's entire dragon when he was alive. If it was also a dragon, wouldn't it be thousands of times bigger than Nysario? However, Nysario felt a trace of familiar aura from that huge bone. Familiar? Are you touched? It is precisely because you defeated it that you, the 5 great dragon aspects, have achieved 25,000 years of glory. Enzos laughed sinisterly. Neltharion suddenly remembered, and his soul exclaimed, Galakrond? That's right, it's Galakron's bone. It was an era when there were no dragons. A group of progenitor dragons lived on the land of Azeroth. They were the most primitive dragons. They did not have the wisdom and strength of dragons, and were just a group of ordinary beasts that preyed on other animals for their own survival. However, due to some unexplained reason, some dragons had a certain level of wisdom and could communicate in primitive languages. They could also consciously cooperate to hunt. Among them were the gray dragon Nysario, the red dragon Alexstrasza, the light yellow dragon Izura, the blue dragon Malygos, the brown dragon Nozdormu, and the golden dragon Talanixia. And Galakrond, the giant progenitor dragon that was later known as the father of all dragons, also lived in that era. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.